Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, name is Weaponizes. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend the state of Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers, all of our supporters for tuning into this briefing so we can give you a little bit behind the headlines, what is happening in this war in Israel. It's a great pleasure to be joined once again by attorney Yifa Segal, who is no stranger to these briefings. Yifa, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again, Moshe.
Absolutely. You are an expert on international law. So let's just dive straight in. Before we talk about international law, actually, let's just dive straight in. What are your thoughts on this war so far? Is Israel poised to accomplish its mission of destroying Hamas in Gaza? What do you think?
I think, I've been thinking this all along, but I think it became more and more clear as days progress and months progress that we are militarily, we're absolutely 100%, there's a military advantage, strategic, tactical, everything in Gaza. It's not an easy task, but we're winning, and there's no question about it. The only thing that is possible to interfere with that is the spirit of some parts of the Israeli or the Jewish population in Israel and across the diaspora. And I think that when we were stronger and united, the more we are strong and united, the better we can do on the battlefield in Gaza, but also internationally. It's a greater deterrence to other enemies, to Hezbollah, to Iran, and to others, and also to Hamas. And I think we forget that wars are often won based on the breaking point. One of the parties get to a point where they just can't fight anymore. Not necessarily technically can't fight, but like spiritually, emotionally, psychologically can't fight anymore, and that's where they break down. And we always have to make sure that it's not us. There's no reason for us to break down, even though it's hard, and we suffer casualties that we care about, each and every one of them. And every day that passes in captivities for our hostages breaks our heart, and that's what makes us the unique society that we are. But we have to keep our spirits high and continue our unity and determination to win the war. And there's no reason at all that we can't just defeat any enemy that comes our way.
Amazing. What do you think is the cause for this erosion of unity, either here in Israel or abroad?
Well, I think we're too Western. Even though we were told from the beginning that this would be a long war, it still seems impossible for most people to comprehend that, within 8 months, the war is still going on. We think that's an intolerable amount of time, even though that if you think of the size of the challenge, not just in terms of going from house to house in dense populated areas in Gaza with all the challenges, but also to deal with, the international attacks and the international legal attacks, and the United Nations, various organizations that are tasked seemingly only with the destruction of Israel, and so having to deal with all of that, and of course the what we have to deal with still in the north and in Judea and Samaria. It's really not that long of time that passed, even though it's hard for us on a daily basis to know that the hostages are still kept in Gaza, and to know that soldiers are still fighting and risking their lives. But I think that's reason number one. We don't have we have a Western grasp of time, which is a bit spoiled, I'm afraid. And yeah, we want to go back to our lives. I was telling my friends, we always go, and there's the northern part of the Jordan River. It's called in Hebrew Yarden Harari, and we always go every summer in July to camp. We do camping trips up there. It's amazing. And we're sitting with a group of friends. We're like, we can't go there this year, and it's very upsetting. So yes, it's upsetting, but we were fighting for our survival. So that's we have to bear in mind, more important.
For sure. So if things escalate with Lebanon and we find ourselves in an all-out war with Hezbollah, that would presumably prolong this war even more. So in your estimation, is that a further breakdown in unity, or somehow, if there was some type of devastation, that would bring people together?
I always worry about that, but history shows that whenever there is a crisis, we always, we always come together in the most beautiful, amazing, unique way. Every crisis, whether it was a war or the COVID pandemic or anything like that, we are amazing at just kind of all of a sudden, from 1 minute to the next, we become this amazing. Ideal model of brotherhood. So, I'm hoping that we can prove that once again if a war breaks in the north.
And I want to go back to something you just said, that we're too Western. We want to get back to our lives. Do you think that characterizes the way Israel is kind of diplomatically dealing with this war, meaning not just the citizens of Israel, but maybe even the leadership not being Middle Eastern enough and aggressive enough? Or is it, no, it's just the population, but the leaders understand?
I don't know what the leaders understand. It's a very good question, and it depends on specifically who we are talking about, and I don't know. Um, but look, it's we I don't envy anyone who has to make these difficult decisions, right? I mean, pressure comes from every even domestically in the Israeli political arena. There are pressures. You see the demonstrations, the people with a narrow political agenda from all political parties all of a sudden forgot that we're fighting for survival, and they now think it's time to go back and dealing with petty stupid shit. Forgive my French. And so I think at this time we would have liked to see greater leadership, again, from all political parties. I'm not even just talking about one party or one person. Um, but I still think the vast majority of Israelis um, understand. I think we're still together, and I think we you know we are the ones who are setting the examples at this moment in time, and not necessarily our leaders. And that's a beautiful thing. Although, unfortunately, I mean, I wish we had others to look up to.
So setting an example. Israel, I think, is setting an example in terms of how to conduct a just war following international law, even though the world doesn't want to accept that we are following international law. But our enemies absolutely do not follow international law. You are a legal expert, an international law expert. Are you able to kind of give us a better understanding on the role of international law in this war and the extent to which it's crippling Israel by being bound by a law that the enemy is not bound by, so to speak?
Yeah, I recently heard a talk by Dan Chiftan, Professor Dan Chiftan, if you know him, and he phrased it in a way that I really liked, and he said this is really a test for the entire world to see if um, if you allow barbarians, he said, to basically use the values that you hold dear against you in a way that will eventually break you and make you lose the war. So our beautiful values of human rights and so on and so forth, will this be our end? Right? I mean, because the way that the Western world is seeing this is actually allowing Hamas to use Western leaders, politicians, policymakers, journalists as an integral part of their military strategy. So the reason for why they want to have civilian casualties, the reason why they want to have children used as human shields, is because this is a major part of their strategy, is to then show the casualties and go to the United Nations or go to the ICC, go to CNN and blame Israel for committing war crimes. So I think we're at a point, and I don't know if he's right about that, because unfortunately what they do against Israel doesn't doesn't set a precedent, right? It's like it's like a different rules of the game often. But what he was trying to say is basically, if we allow this to happen, this is really the test for the world to understand that what we have created in terms of international law has allowed this sinister, evil terrorist organization to use us and our laws as a part of their strategy. And if we allow that to happen, if we allow that to be a determining factor in this war, then that would be the end of civilization, like the enlightened civilization or something like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense. I guess I'm curious to know, like, an example of a law that could be modified or changed, meaning Israel's not about to become a terrorist entity, right? We have to follow laws and we have to be humane. So where would that example be of something that's holding us back, but not morally corrupt, so to speak, if it were modified?
So I don't think the problem that is with the laws themselves is more with how they are being interpreted by the international community, for lack of a better word. So again, instead of looking at the context of the situation, right? So you see, I don't know, let's say 10 civilians were killed in a certain attack in Gaza. So that's horrible, and most people in the West they stop there. It's horrible that 10 civilians were killed. Then Israel, because we are the stronger army, must be to blame, and we need to be we are liable for war crimes, and there must be a ceasefire and all that. But there's no attempts to look further into the context. So, did Hamas put these people there intentionally? Did Hamas maybe shoot some of these people? Some rockets fell, some Hamas rockets fell on the heads of the people in Gaza and actually killed them. So the context is very, very important. Is very, very important in determining whether or not there was a violation of international law. And unfortunately, this is not how practically most of the Western world is doing, is using it.
So on a legal front, are there any areas that Israel is succeeding or in the international arena to advocate for Israel and to gain allies at this point? Meaning, you mentioned there's success on the battlegrounds in Gaza. I'm wondering if there are successes outside of that.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I mean, we just a day or two ago, we saw that Germany came out with stricter laws about anti-Semitism, and people who are violent anti-Semites can be deported from Germany. So so even a country like Germany, that up until October 7th, we weren't so sure, which side they're on in the war against global terrorism and jihadism. They really get it now. I mean, at least in terms of their security organizations, and there are a lot of counterparts that we work with that really get it. A lot of people that didn't get it before. So Germany is not the only country, and if you look at the professional level, right, military level, police, FBI style organizations across the Western world, most of them get it more than they used to get it before October 7th, and they experience the violence and the disruption of life in almost every city, every major city in across the West since October 7th. So we have a lot more. We are able to get a lot more done on those levels. We do suffer, in terms of public opinion. So, what people are seeing on the news, what people are getting from social media is something that, Israel and the pro-Israel world, we haven't been able to kind of find a way to really get our message across and convey our messaging properly. And it's also a problem because there are more people on the other side than there are on our side, exponentially. But there are great wins, and you see things like Canada designated the Revolutionary Guards. That's after many years of lobbying for that, not just Israel, but us especially. So yes, I think also good things have happened.
And are you able to kind of explain what is that conversation like? Meaning, if you're sitting down with German officials or Canadian officials, what do you have to express to them that the light bulb goes off? Is it showing them footage of October 7th? Is it opening up obscure legal volumes about international law? Like what really makes that change happen?
I think, by now, most everyone who was open to seeing the truth about October 7th, I think, or most people have already. And so in most meetings, like I had a meeting yesterday with some military attaches here in Israel, and they started the meeting by saying, we want to say how sorry we are for October 7th, and we want to, send our condolences. And so that's how a lot of meetings start with the European officials or Americans or Canadians since October 7th. And I think it's a very good start. And we often find common grounds when they say, okay, we see, Hamas infrastructure of activists and charity organizations in our country. And, we want your help with information so that we can take over or shut down these domestic threats. So yeah, so that's often the conversation of where it meets them domestically. That is often what is concerning to them.
Yifa, thank you so much for taking all of these questions I'm peppering you with. And thank you to all of our viewers who are sending in questions either by email to me or during the chat. Yifa, one question that's coming in is about the ICC arrest warrants. Are you able, you could speak for hours and hours on this topic. Are you able just to give a little bit of background for those not aware of what's going on and just the most recent update in terms of progress there?
Yeah, so the ICC have been looking into the possibility of indictments in the situation in Palestine, as they call it, since 2020, when the ICC came back with the decision that completely distorts international law and grants them authority to adjudicate the situation here in Israel. I can go into that, but if you want to ask me later questions, I can explain. So since 2020, basically, we've been kind of waiting to see what the ICC will do. We have, a new prosecutor since then. A lot of us have thought him to be more pragmatic, more reasonable, that he understands, how problematic the case against Israel is and how problematic their whole assertion of jurisdiction over Israel is. And there was a lot of pressure from Israeli officials, whether it's the foreign ministry or the Ministry of Justice, and et cetera, and also from allied countries like Germany, by the way, the Americans, of course, and others. And so what happened was that with the beginning of the war, there was all of a sudden a renewed interest by the prosecutors team in the ICC, and a lot of Israelis, and I thought it was a mistake at the time, thought that they can get justice from the ICC for us, for the victims of October 7th. And so they encouraged the prosecutor to come here, and it was the first time that he was accepted in Israel and was allowed to come on an official visit. And I knew that this meant trouble. And yes, he came out with a statement. On one hand, he's requesting the court to issue arrest warrants against Yifa Segal and Muhammad Def and Ismail Haniyeh, but on the same moral equivalent, he puts also the Prime Minister of Israel and the Israeli Minister of Defense. And the next thing is for the court to come back with a decision on whether or not they are going to issue these arrest warrants at the request of the prosecutor. So first of all, I'll tell you that this process often takes months, several months. There were exceptions, like in the case of Putin after the invasion of Ukraine. It was a lot faster. We don't, unfortunately, even though there's a lot of diplomatic pressure, not just by the Israelis, but also from some allies of ours on the ICC, we don't foresee the court dismissing the request of the prosecutor. Unfortunately, I mean, we see trouble coming fast. This is, some of the allegations, they are complete. It's I don't know which word to use that I can use in this forum. I have only bad words that come to mind, but the one of the allegations was for starvation, for intentional the causing of starvation in Gaza. And then I don't know, Moshe, if you saw this a few days ago, there was a leak from the United Nations. Turns out that one of the United Nations have all kinds of different divisions and departments, and so one of them made some people, they're actually serious professionals. So some people said to write a report about, there's a bar that indicates, below that bar there's people are starving, and above that bar, I mean, situation might not be nice, but it's not a situation of real hunger crisis. So they came to the conclusion that there is no, with the amount of humanitarian aid that has been going into Gaza and all kinds of indications that they have, that there's no reason to believe that there's, that the situation in Gaza is below the bar needed for like a critical situation of people starving to death. And so you have on one hand an indictment or a request for an indictment by the ICC saying intentional starvation, while the report of the United Nations that was, oh, by the way, I didn't say that they tried to hide, they tried to bury it because it doesn't, fit with the agenda. But, the professional report says, people are not even starving. So how can there be intentional starvation if people are not starving? But, leave it to the United Nations to find a way for it to work, somehow. So that's the situation with the ICC. It's a waiting game. We believe it's a matter of weeks, maybe even days.
And when that final decision comes out, does anything change in Israel?
So again, it's a real question of leadership. And I think I told you this last time that we spoke, that if any one of our leaders, whether it's a political leader or a military leader, thinks that it will deter him, from doing his job and doing what's right by the people of Israel, if there's an arrest warrant for him in a European city, then he should not be. This is not the job for him. He should resign. And if we can all be on the same page with that, then nothing should change. At least not on the ground. I'm sure the foreign ministry, their lives would be a lot harder, because every time now that the foreign minister, the prime minister, or the minister of defense have to travel somewhere, it's a real headache, because you have to make sure that none of these countries will abide by the arrest warrant, and it's a real challenge, and it's a big headache. But again, I hope that people are not, that they have their priorities in place. Let's call it that.
For sure. Final question about UNRWA or UN peacekeeping in Lebanon. Any thoughts to share about what's happening there?
So UNRWA in Lebanon, or are we talking about Lebanon or Gaza?
Either one.
Okay. So look, peacekeeping forces have historically proven to be worthless, and actually worthless is a compliment, because if worthless means that they're not doing any good, but also they don't cause any harm, and that's not what the situation is in Lebanon, because unfortunately Hezbollah has been exploiting their presence, and they have been creating a lot of harm, at least vicariously. So I know that there are a lot of people who are afraid of the day that they actually pack up and leave, but I think that since they're nothing but trouble, I might as well leave. So that's Lebanon. And when it comes to UNRWA, look, I mean, I think UNRWA is a big part of the problem. I think I know that they also provide humanitarian aid, they also provide education and stuff like that, but they contribute so much to the problem. They cause so much problem, and not just perpetuating the conflict, but also just giving terrorists like Hamas a place to hide under the guise of the United Nations, where to hide their weapons, where to fire their rockets, where to for UNRWA staff to even hold the hostages and without accountability. So I think that like anywhere else in the world, there are solutions to humanitarian needs, and the sooner we get rid of UNRWA, the better. By the way, there was an amazing lawsuit that was filed in New York a couple of days ago. I advise everybody to go and look for the lawsuit that was filed. It's completely an innovative legal approach that was taken. Very proud of my friends and colleagues for their work, and let's hope they win.
Very good. Yifa Segal, thank you so much for joining this briefing. It's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you next week, 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.